This show is brought to you by Databril, the scalable Amazon PPC management for large Amazon sellers and brands. Visit sellersessions.com/agency for more details. Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Today I bring in David Barry from AMZ Europe. Is that right, David?
That's right, Danny. Thanks.
Excellent. No worries. Do you want to give the audience a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, so I suppose I'll talk about AMZ or AMZ Europe, which is kind of the focus today, talking about listing translation. So we are dedicated to helping sellers launch and grow on Amazon's European marketplaces. So we started up in the summer of 2016, co-founded by my business partner, Jeremy, and I. Jeremy's French, and he had started selling on Amazon, and he had noticed there was so many poorly written listings on Amazon France, and people weren't adapting their listings to suit the French culture. And out of this, we kind of spotted an opportunity to, put a solution out there to this problem, and we derived a listing optimization service for Amazon Europe. So that's kind of the focus of what we do, but we also put out a lot of free content as well on our blog and through our newsletter.
Cool, sounds good. So we like to get straight into it on Seller Sessions. So give me some funny antidotes in terms of where you've seen listings go wrong in terms of poor translation.
Yeah, I think probably the worst one was one Jeremy told me about. There was a €125 pendant on Amazon France, and in the title, the second word actually meant rotten, so R-O-T-T-E-N. So that's one of the funnier ones I've heard of. There was another one, a razor on Amazon France, and it was the first ever razor for stainless steel beards, which is obviously a weird one. Did you hear about the HSBC one about 10 years ago as well? There was they had a campaign around the time of the financial crisis, and they were trying to show that they had changed with the times, and the slogan of the campaign was "assume nothing," but it actually had been mistranslated in a few languages into meaning "do nothing."
Yeah.
So that cost them about 10 million to rebrand across those marketplaces and correct that issue. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that's the biggest problem that you can come across. You look in, I always pay €200, €300 up when it comes to the listing. There's a few things that I bring into play here is that I found that at the very beginning of my Amazon journey, you're thinking, well, I'm going to jump onto this marketplace. I don't know how well I'm going to do, but I don't want to really invest a fortune on a listing because I don't know how well you're going to sell, which is a double-edged sword there, because you're definitely not going to sell for shit if you've got a piss poor listing and grab someone a fiver. And that's exactly what I did back in the day. Obviously you get older, you get wiser, and you realize the errors of your ways. Because one of the most difficult things is not finding a shitty translator on Fiverr who's doing it through Google Translate. It's how do you validate it? So there was a case on Fiverr back then. I'd get another person on Fiverr to validate it, to check off against the listing. But we're going back 3+ years, I think.
Yeah.
But even up till recently, we'd done a launch into another market, and I actually spent $300 or $400 on a listing.
Yeah. And
the person was local, was born locally, but I won't say the country because I don't want to, embarrass the person. Was born locally, but then was educated in the US. And I couldn't work out why this listing wasn't converted. And then I showed it to another seller, a friend of mine, is in the competitive space, his wife writes all these listings. And they took one look at it and they fell about laughing. And there's issues there with like the dialect and, I don't know much about the breakdown of the language itself, but he was talking about there was lots of confusion in the way that listing was written, like it was done by a person from multiple regions in this country. And as soon as she like the lady who took it on, she rewrote the listing. She was embarrassed for me, rewrote the listing from ground up, didn't even charge me for it. And it just converted straight away. So that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned about it. And I'll never go off map now in terms of using a service, especially if I speak to someone, I always want to know that it's their native tongue.
Yeah.
Rather than, you know, you get people go, oh yeah, I'm French, but I also speak English and German.
Yeah, that definitely makes a big difference. And I think that's one of the common pitfalls for people where, you know, maybe they're going into the Spanish market, and rather than hiring a Castilian Spanish speaker, they can get a Latin American Spanish speaker for half the price. But the problem is, it's just not going to suit the Spanish market itself. The language, people will identify immediately that it's not Castilian Spanish.
I think one of the other biggest problems that you would face as well, a translator isn't a conversion optimizer and a marketer at the same time. So it's very difficult to bring all of those elements together. Because, you know, one thing here is to rewrite a listing culturally, but what are the tools that the translator using for the keyword research? Do they actually know how to conduct keyword research? And do they know the difference between just popular search terms and relevant search terms with search volume? And where do they get their data from? Is it proper Amazon data? Obviously, there's plenty of tools out there now that tap Amazon through the back door to get proper data. And there's also the tools out there that just use Bing data or Google data. And what they're doing is they're just guessing by writing an algorithm, so the data isn't totally clear. So it's a very difficult minefield to go through. I mean, if you look at if you were to cut corners in a sense, and one thing that you can use is a tool called Sonar.tools, I think it's called. Can't remember the exact name of it. You have to do a search online for it. But basically what that does is that you've got images, so you can do search terms, and then you click on the images and it gives you relevant images to that search term. So if you are going after a spatula and all the images show a spatula, then that gives you the relevancy. But it becomes much more difficult when you're trying to break down these keywords, hence going back to the status of you need to, where possible, work with someone with the native tongue of that country and converse with them and work with them together. Through your agency, what's the best methods have you found?
Well, I'd say, touching on the point of what you've said there, you know, keyword research and then the localization of the sales copy, they're two very different skills. So what we've done in all of our languages, we'll have a native keyword research expert and then a native copywriter. So we'll start off with the keyword research. Keyword researcher will then give those keywords to the localizer before they work on the sales copy.
Yeah.
So when we started out, we did try and do the two together, but they're both very specific skill sets. So we found that it was better to split them out. And it's also good too, because the localizer often will say, oh, well, did you find this keyword, or how about this keyword? So it's, you know, two minds often is better than one. I mean, I think another one as well that a lot of sellers don't think about is, you know, not just localizing the listing, but the other aspects of your offering, right? So instruction manuals, product packaging, ebook. Because, you know, let's imagine you're an Italian customer and you get a product in the post and, you know, the instruction manual is only in English or maybe English and German. I mean, immediately that's going to frustrate you because most Italians don't speak English, you know, to a high level. So, you know, definitely put yourself in the shoes of the buyer in that particular country and try to offer as much value as possible.
Yeah.
The good thing is it's going to, in my opinion, it's going to improve your chance of making a sale when they know all of these things are tailored to them. It's also going to reduce refunds, questions from customers, and mitigate potential negative reviews as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, you pointed out a good thing there in terms of Italy. Like, if we were to generalize here, let's just say something like an umbrella, which is ubiquitous, right? There's a chance if you know you can rank in each of these territories, then everyone buys an umbrella in all these different countries, yeah? But then you might have a niche product that doesn't sell well. It only works really well in the UK and Germany. And then you've got sleepy Spain, as I like to call it. And then you've got outworldly Italy, which seem to be a little bit behind on online, I would say. They're still, that market's still kind of growing and getting their head around Amazon. So then I agree with what you're saying, but then it becomes that cost thing. It's like, it's always that chicken and egg with the investment, isn't it? It's like when you go and learn about a marketplace, let's say you start selling on eBay or other marketplaces, you start low, don't you? Or when you start selling in a new territory like Japan, you'd send test products in, wouldn't you? Just to get a feel for the market, see if, you know, how that whole processes work. It makes it very difficult with the translation thing. You have to literally go all in. You need to make sure that the translation is bang on. You're using the right people for it. You need to know that you're utilizing the right keywords and stuff like that, because otherwise it's going to have a massive impact on your chances of success in that marketplace. Because effectively, if you don't speak the language, you are flying blind and you're relying on other people to educate you and reassure you.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, there's a couple of points I have to add there. You know, if you are in a situation where you're looking at another marketplace and you think, well, look, I can do 60% of what I need to do to get this product there, but, you know, I'm going to have to go for a cheap listing. I won't be able to translate the ebook or the instruction manual. I mean, maybe the time isn't right. You know, maybe just hold back until you do have the cash there to do it.
Yeah.
And then in terms of, we were talking about Japan as well. I think like a lot of the same principles apply there, but Japan culturally would be very, very different than, you know, the European marketplace. So I think while, you know, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain are all definitely different than the US and the UK, there is some similarity. So if we look at it as a strategic option, I think the European marketplaces definitely offer more of a moderate risk, I would say, rather than a high risk.
Of course, yeah. The point I was getting to is that you need to go all in. There's no point in going, I'll do a nice listing in Germany, but then in Spain, which may have across the board, generally a lower sales across the marketplace. You launching there is like a false economy if you then do a listing off someone from Fiverr. Because the thing is, if it's already small and there's not much to be had, then you're going to take less market share anyway, because you're not giving yourself the best chance possible. But the cost of doing so, of launching in that market, may be the same cost as launching in Germany, but there is like lesser return. So you might have a product that sells 25 in the UK, 35 in Germany, but 10 in Italy, 10 in Spain, 15 in France. But the costs of taking them there is the same, isn't it? You're still going to spend the same kind of money. Because that's the other thing what people's got to remember. It's not just your listing that needs translating. Other than the German market, unless you're going on the down low, sending out emails, then you've got to have your emails translated. If you're doing giveaways, you need your Facebook ads to be translated. And of course, if you want to go all in into that marketplace, get your instructions or your inserts to be translated, that can end up being another cost. This is why whenever I speak to anyone through the agency, you know, because we do multi-market on Databrill, we do multi-language PPC. We go across all the different markets, but I always say to anyone like we bring in from the US is don't just come in with 100 SKUs across every single marketplace. Let's work out what works, because there's no point in shipping over to the UK and then spreading out across the EU. Does that make sense? My thing is that you do them in smaller batches. You don't go and get 100 translations and launch 100 products. You do them in batches of 5s or 10s or 3s or 4s. Get a feel for the market and scale it up once you know you have a system in place that's worked with history.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think that's better, A, for the budget, but B, also for the focus. Like if you're trying to monitor 10 products being launched across 5 marketplaces, you know, you're going to need a really, really big team to do that. Obviously, most Amazon sellers are not in that boat, so I definitely agree with that approach. Yeah,
makes sense. So do you want to give us a little bit of, talk through a bit of your process that you go through for a translation? You know, you mentioned that you got 2 people that work on the team. You've got the translator, and then you've got someone who's a specialist in terms of keyword research, which is very important. So how does that break down for you?
Yeah, so we will start with the keyword researcher, right? So they'll look at competitor listings, they'll use software and tools to identify the best keywords to target. Then they'll provide a keyword list to we don't call them a localizer or a translator, we call them a localizer, right? So the localizer's job is to take the sales copy from Amazon.com or Amazon UK and put it into the target language. And so we do localization. So it's a mix of translation and copywriting, right? So the idea is not just to provide a word for word translation, but we're looking to adapt it to the local culture. So we're keeping the core parts of your listing, of your message, but we're making sure that when a local reads that, they're like, oh yeah, this makes sense. This looks like it's been written by, you know, someone from my country, which is going to boost your credibility, right? Then the last phase then for us, so before we send you the listing, which is everything. So we give a title, bullets, description, search terms, and a list of PPC terms as well. Before we do that, we have a proofreader who goes through everything with a fine-tooth comb just to make sure there's no spelling mistakes, there's no grammatical errors, because, you know, the first two steps are only as good as that step. You know, if we put out a listing and there's a sloppy spelling error, it's going to hurt your credibility for sure. So we're really, really detail focused with that.
Yeah, makes total sense. What about, have you noticed any uplift in terms of enhanced brand content? Do you get a lot of requests to do that across the multi-market? Because, for instance, if you've got, and this may have changed, but from memory, if you've got, like the way we did, we've got a UK trademark, which took us about 8 weeks or 9 weeks to come through, which will allow you to use for brand registry in places like the US, which I'm sure you can use for Germany, etc., because the whole point of having that in the market that you're in, like for instance for the EU, that you could submit that, not because it protects you, say in Germany, but it's a door opener for brand registry, which is obviously as a leader into enhanced brand content. Are you finding that you get many requests for the enhanced brand content, and what have you seen in terms of conversions? Is that made a big difference opposed to just having the standard description?
Yeah, I think compared to this time last year, there's definitely a steady uptick in the number of people who are doing it. I think the European marketplaces are, you know, a few years behind what you'll see in the US. So, you know, whatever trend was working really well in US, you'll see they come to Europe a little bit later. Maybe not a couple of years for all trends, but in general. Yeah. In terms of conversion, I think it really depends. So depends on the quality of the listing. So I've seen some enhanced brand content on Amazon.com, for example, that looks amazing. If you have really good pictures, I think PPC is only really as good as the pictures that are there. If the pictures are good, I would expect conversion to improve. But if your pictures are, you know, middle of the road and you haven't really invested in them, I wouldn't expect that EBC will boost conversion in the other market.
So what are some of the other standouts for you in terms of making sure that when you're speaking to your clients about getting their listings right?
I think honestly, one of the most important things to tell people is about, we kind of call it 3 Ps, right? So a listing will be a function of your product, your price point, and your photos. Yeah. So if you have a good product at a good price point with good photos, our listings will work really, really well. But it's not like a rescue solution. You know, like if you're pricing the same type of product and it's 30% higher than all of the market, you know, there's no listing optimization service out there in the world that's going to be able to rectify that. So yeah, we definitely like to speak quite frankly to people about that. And I think, you know, another thing as well, before you even look at launching in a market, do your research on it. Make sure that there are some sales there. So don't waste your budget and launch in Spain your new product if there's very little sales there.
Yeah, just make sure there's search volume. Use the available tools out there. I'm not here to promote tools, but there are plenty out there that you can do your product research that work multi-market anyway.
And I think one final point is whoever you work with as well, you want to make sure that obviously they're a native speaker, but you really want someone who's a copywriter, right?
Yeah.
So turning a text from language A to language B, there's thousands and maybe millions of people online you can find to do that. But the goal here is conversion and sales, right? So make sure that whoever you work with, and hopefully it's us, AMZ Europe, but that's really important, right? So you want to make sure that they're not just going word for word on what you have on Amazon US, because if you translate that into German, for example, it's not going to work well. There's major.
Well, culturally as well, like the Germans are very much more, they're efficient and matter of fact, and they're straight to the point. Whereas you can obviously in the US, everything's big and beautiful and bright, and you can ham it up, can't you? The copy. So it's a different approach. It can be more boastful, if you like, for exactly, a better term. But you do that in Germany, you get buried alive.
Yeah, that is the perfect example of cultural differences, the US versus Germany. As you alluded to there, in the US, you can be, you can be somewhat exaggerated in your listing. In Germany, that's just not going to work, right? They want facts. They want evidence of quality. If you start going over the top, you're going to lose them immediately. And I think that's one of the reasons why German people dominate that marketplace. There's a lot of sales on there, but in general, the German sellers are doing
the winners. Yeah,
doing really well there. Yeah, it's not as easy, I think, for people coming from the US or the UK
or the Chinese. Yeah, I think they don't have a chance to dominate as much. I'm sure we don't have the full data, but my studies of the German marketplace, I agree with you. The Germans do it best over there. Whereas, say, for the UK and the US, the Chinese can find a way of dominating in the more popular niches, right? Yeah. But I think you're right. With the German market, the Germans they run the show, their own show.
Yeah, and I guess you can see that reflected in the PPC too, right? At least the PPC numbers I see. The US is obviously the most competitive. Then you have the UK, which is catching up. But the other markets, Germany is getting close to the UK, I guess. But the other three, you can get some really low cost per click there. That is the great opportunity with those other markets.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one. I found as well in Germany, and this is anecdotal, it's not like loads of data, but sometimes you can really struggle to get your search terms out in Germany in terms of the auto campaigns. Sometimes you'd run on the listing and you'd end up going back with a translator, and you look at how your content on your listing is indexing as well. There was a point I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was a period, like, again, back in the day, I was using things like pipes, to separate the words. And that was a big no-no for auto campaigns from one of the PPC team that I spoke to in Germany. So you have to be careful with symbols and the wording there as well. So you end up having different challenges that you try to unravel, which is not just related to the language itself. So it can be quite difficult.
Yeah, and I think that backs up what you were saying earlier about the launch strategy in these countries too, right? You really want to go in, not soft, but you want to go in with a limited number of products and iron out these problems before you've shipped thousands and thousands of units there.
Yeah.
Make sure that you understand the lay of the land and you have like a system in place.
That's cool. Excellent. So is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, Danny, I think we covered everything. Again, really appreciate the opportunity and hope the audience will enjoy this chat.
No worries. What's the best way that people can reach you?
By email, I think, is probably the best one. So you can get me at contact@amzeurope.com.
And if they want to visit the website, it's just amzeurope.com, yeah?
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect.
Excellent. David, thank you for joining me today. Guys, thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I'll see you again in the next few days. Take care.